Dear students, I am taking up chapter number 22, the Halving Principle, section 1. The general rule of Halving Principle is when a stroke is halved, the sound of either T or D is added to that stroke. This is the general rule of a Halving Principle. But in case of monosyllabic word, monosyllabic word means if a word contains only one syllable, that is called as monosyllabic word. In case of monosyllabic word, when a thin stroke when a thin stroke is halved, only T sound is added. When a thick stroke is halved, only D sound is added. We know the normal length of a stroke is 1/6 of an inch. Now, if you halve it, when a thin stroke is halved, only T is added. See this example. Pat, pad. Pat, P plus R plus T. When P is a thin stroke, if you halve it, you can add the sound of T. It is written above the line. Pad, P plus R plus D. Here, P is a thin stroke. When we halve it, we get only the sound of T, not the sound of D. So here you cannot halve. You have to write P and D in full. In the same way, when a thick stroke is halved, only D is halved, D is added, not the sound of T. For example, bad, bat. Bad, B plus R plus D. B is a thick stroke. By halving that, you can add the sound of D. In case of bat, B plus R plus T. By halving B, you have to add the sound of T. This is a monosyllabic word. When a thick stroke is halved in case of monosyllabic word, only D is added, not the sound of T. So here you cannot halve for the addition of T. You have to write in full B and T. This is the first rule. The rule is in case of monosyllabic word, when a thin stroke is halved, only T is added. When a thick stroke is halved, D is added. But if a word contains more than one syllable, then in that case, irrespective of whether it is a thin stroke or a thick stroke, we can halve it and add the sound of either T or D. For example, compare these words. Rapid. Here the sound is ra and then pid. P plus E plus D. So write ray. Now we have to write pid for P. By halving P, we have to add the sound of D. Even though P is a thin stroke, we can halve it and add the sound of D because the word contains more than one syllable. In the same way, rabbit. Rabbit. Ra and then bit. By halving B, you have to add the sound of T. Here, even though B is a thick stroke, we can halve it and add the sound of T because the word contains more than one syllable. So this is the second rule. If a word contains more than one syllable, irrespective of whether it is a thin stroke or a thick stroke, we can have it and add the sound of either T or D. If a monosyllabic word, the outline, if it has a final hook or attached diphthong, so even though it is a monosyllabic word, we can have it and add the sound of either T or D. For example, 10, it is a monosyllabic word, but there is a final hook. In that case, when you have it, you can add the sound of either T or D, T plus A plus N plus T, tent, or T plus A plus N plus D, tend. So you can add both the sound of T and D because even though it is a monosyllable, it has a final hook. In the same way, this is men. It is a monosyllabic word, but there is a final hook N. So when you have it, M houd and N hook, you can add either T or D. M plus A plus N plus T, that is meant. M plus A plus N plus D, meant. You can add both the sound of T and D. In the same way, if there is an attached diphthong, here the word attached is important. It should be attached. For example, D-O-U-B-T, doubt, D-houd and houd diphthong. So there is an attached diphthong. So here, even though D is a thick stroke, you can have it and add the sound of T, even though doubt is a monosyllabic word. But you have to write doubts. Here you cannot have it because you cannot add the diphthong. So for doubts, you have to write in full. We cannot have it here. Next step. Vocalizing howland form. Then, how to? When we mark the vowel, how to read it? For example, F houd, I diphthong. Here, how to read this is, if there is a preceding vowel, we have to read that first. Otherwise, first we have to read the consonant which we are having, that is F, and then the right hand side vowel, and then by having it, whatever sound we get, we have to pronounce that. Fight. Here in this case, preceding vowel is there. First you have to read that vowel A, and then the consonant which we are having, that is F. By having that, you get the sound of T, that is oft. This is how you have to read a howland stroke. For a howd stroke, you can add the circle to add the sound of S. For example, coat, you can add circle, coats. Rent, rehowd enuk. Rents, you can add rehowd enuk, circle. Rift, rehowd hook. Rifts, rehowd hook, circle. We do not employ Halving principle in the following cases. First one is, if a word contains more than one syllable, if a vowel follows final T or D, Halving principle is not employed. For example, pit, pity. For pit, you can employ Halving principle, T or T. But pity, it contains more than one syllable. After T, there is a vowel. So in this case, you cannot employ Halving principle. You have to write in full. Greed, Garhad. But greedy, after D, there is vowel. You cannot employ Halving principle. The second one, when we do not employ Halving principle is when a triphone immediately precedes TRD. If a triphone comes before TRD, we should not employ Halving principle. Triphone means the union of three vowel sounds. You compare these two words. F-I-G-H-T, fight. F-I-A-T, fight. Fight, here the sound is F plus I plus T. Here there is, before T, there is only a diphthong, not a triphone. Here you can employ Halving principle. F out, I diphthong, the sound of T is added. But in case of fiat, F plus I plus O plus T. Here before T, there is a triphone. Here you cannot employ Halving principle. In that case, you have to write F and T in full. You cannot employ Halving principle. Next, third rule, when we do not employ Halving principle, that is, if two words, by employing Halving principle, if they have the same consonant structure, so in such cases, we try to write them in different way. For one word, we employ Halving principle. For the other word, we do not employ Halving principle. For example, hot, hotly. Hotly and hotel. Hotly and hotel. If you employ Halving principle, what happens? Hot, hard, L, hard, L, hot, hotly, and hotel also you could have written hard, L. So when we write this, what happens? Both of them look alike. So in such cases, for one word we use Halving principle. For the other one, we write all the consonants in full. Hotly, we employ Halving principle. Hotel, we write in full. A, T, and L. In the same way, unavoidable and inevitable. Unavoidable. If you apply Halving principle, unavoidable. Inevitable, if you imply Halving principle, N, V hard, and bal. So both of them, the consonant structure is same. So in such case, for unavoidable, we employ Halving principle. For inevitable, we do not employ Halving principle, we write in full. Next. When race stands alone and only surplus is attached, it should not be halved. For example, right. If you write ray halved, what happens? You will read it as and. For rights, if you write ray halved circle, you will read it as and is or and as. So ray is not hooked, ray is not halved for the addition of T or D. So for right, you have to write in full. Rights also, you have to write in full. But if there is a final attachment, you can have it. But as in the words rent, rift, etc. When H stands alone, we have learned it is always written downward. But when H is halved, it should not be written downwards. It should always be written upward. Howland form of H is always written upward, as in height, heights, hint, hound, etc. Next, position of Howland forms. When a stroke is howled, what should be the position of the outline? For example, pat, he howled. It is the first place vowel. It is written above the line. Pet, he howled. It is the second place outline. It is written on the line. But, pit, pit. There is a third place vowel. But there is a rule. When a stroke is howled, it should not be written through the line. So in case of pit, even though there is a third place vowel, it should be written on the line only. So in case of first place, above the line. In case of second place and third place, it is always written on the line. The Howland stroke should not be written through the line. So this ends the chapter of Halving Principle, section 1. Now the grammar locks in this chapter. K hard above the line. It represents quite. K hard on the line, it represents could. Cur hard above the line represents accord, according. Cur hard on the line represents cared. Gur hard above the line represents guard. The same thing if you write gur hard on the line, it represents great. Thin, kal hard above the line represents called. On the line, it represents hard, cold. If you write it thick, hard on the line, it represents gold. D, when it is hard and it is written above the line, it represents that. If you write on the line, it represents the word without. Ishhard on the line, it represents wished. So write this grammar locks one page each. At the same time, whatever grammar locks have come in the previous chapter, at least you write them one line each. After practicing these grammar locks, you have to take the dictation. Now I will give the dictation. Exercise number 85 at page 105. Here, the shorthand outlines are there. So as usual, you read the shorthand outlines, copy the shorthand outlines and transcribe it into longhand. After transcribing, you check up with the key that is given at the end whether if you have made any mistakes, you write those outlines several times so that that mistake is not repeated again. Now I will give the dictation, exercise number 85. Please get ready. Start. Truth has been divided into three kinds. Truth about things, truth of thought about things, and truth in the accurate expression of thought about things. According to ancient authorities, truth could be said to be a correspondence between thought and thing. It seems perfectly easy for anyone to think accurately about a thing with which he is quite well acquainted. But the case is not quite so simple as that, and there is, without doubt, a great deal to be said before it can be called sinful. Full stop. Suppose an unfortunate accident occurred in a London street and that six people witnessed the accident, and we are asked to relate exactly what had happened. Full stop. It is quite certain that we should receive different accounts from each of them. The result would not be a correspondence between thought and the thing thought about, and so the statements would not be true. It is to be regretted that limited space prevents a more extended argument, though we could extend it if we cared to do so. Next, get ready for dictation. Exercise 86. You open the key for exercise 86. There you will find shorthand outline. Read those shorthand outlines, copy those shorthand outlines, and transcribe. Next, you check up with exercise 86 that is given at page 106. If you have made any mistakes, correct those mistakes. Write those outlines several times so that you will not repeat those mistakes. Now get ready for taking dictation. Start. It has been maintained that certainty does not admit of degrees of any kind, that there can be no shade of difference in the intensity of our certainty. But let us see. A man may be certain that he settled his debt with his tailor on the 10th of October and in cash, or that he paid his local rates on demand. But is this certainty equalled by the certainty with which he knows that 3 and 4 make 7, or that heat will melt butter? Is there not a great difference?